Hey guys, tonight we journey through candlelight and cold marble into a life few talk about a life powdered in rose petals, but pressed beneath gold sandals. You're a boy, barely grown, taken from the fringes of a forgotten empire, sold under a sun that makes even your tears dry before they fall. You arrive in Rome not with hope, but with silent eyes, because you already know you're not meant to write your own story. You're the story others will use. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from, what time it is. Rome had 11 hours of daylight in summer. What about you? Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge off the galley, wrists raw from weeks of restraint, and into the seething white stone of the Roman port. The scent of fish, fire, and sweat hits you like a slap. You're one of 20, maybe 30 captives off this particular ship. Most are too broken to resist. You stand still. It earns you a sharp look. Not defiance, just not collapse. And that's exactly what draws the first bidder's eye. A slaver notes your face, your build, your scars or lack of them. Runs a practiced finger along your jaw. You flinch. He smiles. That's all it takes. They don't parade you like livestock, not at first. You're taken to a quieter house, with velvet drapes and iron rings embedded in the walls. Not a prison, not a home. Somewhere in between. One man calls it a holding palace. Another calls it the waiting room to hell. Your name, your language, your clothes. Stripped. You're scrubbed with something that smells like citrus and lye. Your skin burns a little. The water is hot to hottened. They laugh when you flinch again. Your hair is cut bluntly, not styled. Not yet. That comes later. At night you lie on linen to clean for comfort. You don't sleep. The ceiling flickers with torchlight, and outside you hear soft sobbing. You're not alone in your silence. In the morning, a new group enters. Buyers, patrons. Power. They don't look at you like you're a person. They tilt their heads and murmur as if inspecting architecture. You get that look a lot from now on, the where will he fit in my estate? Look, one man, older and thick around the middle. Watches you longer than the others? His tunic is purple trimmed. You later learn that means he's a senator. He lifts your chin with 2 fingers and says something you don't understand. But the slaver nods, and the coins clink. And just like that, you belong to Lucius Nerva, Massala. A man whose name takes longer to say than he takes to decide your fate. You don't go straight to his villa. First, there's preparation. You're moved to a domus in the Subararum's cramped, wealthy underbelly. There you learn the beginnings of what you'll have to be. Not just a slave, not just a servant, something more performative. Something softer, sharper, and much, much harder to survive. Now here's the weird bit. You're not trained by soldiers or tutors. You're trained by eunuchs. These men glide rather than walk. They speak 10 languages and lie in every one of them. They teach you posture, diction, how to eat a fig without making a sound. One slaps your shoulder when you slump and says, "You're not a gladiator. You're perfume in motion." They also teach you not to speak unless addressed, unless prompted, unless desired, which it turns out you will be. Historians still argue whether male concubines like you were rare or just rarely documented. But the fragments, letters, graffiti, household records all hint. You were not alone. One day, a merchant's boy whispers a joke during your water-fetching lesson. You laugh just a little. That night, he's gone. Taken, reassigned, or worse. Nobody explains. They don't need to. Your own test comes on the 3rd week. You're brought into a dimly lit chamber, perfumed with lavender and myrrh. 2 noble women and a man sit in a crescent of cushions. You're asked to recite verses. In Greek you do, then in Latin you fumble. They giggle. The man does not. You'll do, he says. Later, the eunuch tutor tells you that man could buy a province. Instead, he bought you. You sleep with the knowledge that your value is no longer in what you do, but what you might become. Strange historical tidbit surfaces here. The Romans believed the eyes could consume beauty like food. They genuinely worried about overindulgence. Some even wore protective amulets to avoid being too affected by beautiful people. Lucky you. So, you're moved again this time to the senator's estate, a sprawling complex outside the city. The walls are painted with frescoes of nymphs and gods. You're shown to a small but elegant room, soft bedding, a bronze mirror, and one narrow window that faces west. That night, you sleep facing it, hoping the sun might carry you somewhere else. Come morning, it doesn't. You wake to new clothes, new rules, and the weight of a senator's gaze that lingers a little too long. This is your new world. Velvet drapes hiding iron chains. You wake to the rustle of linen and the whisper of sandals. On polished stone, the villa's staff moves like a well-oiled machine. Nobody speaks unless necessary, and certainly not to you. You're still the new one, the untested one, the one with potential, ... That's not always a blessing here. Your first true morning under Senator Masala's roof begins not with breakfast, but with inspection. You're brought into a side atrium where warm light filters through slatted windows, painting your bare feet in golden stripes. A eunuch named Ignatius Stahl, with cheekbones sharp enough to slice fig circles, you slowly. He holds a narrow strip of dyed silk in one hand and a curved bronze razor in the other. You flinch less than most, he murmurs. That's either from courage, ... or you're too stunned to know what's coming. It's the second one, actually. They begin with another bath, this time in scented water steeped with rosemary and mint. To attendants scrub you with rough cloth then, smoother ones, then pumice. By the end, your skin feels foreign, polished down to something theatrical. This isn't hygiene. It's preparation. Then comes the shearing. Every hair below your neck removed in clinical silence. For hygiene, they say. For beauty, they mean, and then yes, what you feared, what you guessed the moment you were sold. The cut it happens. In a room with cushions and a single brazier, its coals glowing dull orange. Ignatius explains your role now. Not quite servant, not quite pleasure slave. Something in between? A delicatus. A delicate thing. He doesn't warn you how much it will hurt, but he stays afterward, pressing cloths and giving you bitter syrup. To bite down the fever, it gets easier. He lies. Historians still argue whether all concubines were castrated or only the most prized ones. Some say it was optional, others claim it was standard. But in households like Masala's, it was definitely expected. A beautiful, docile, sterile companion, what every powerful Roman thinks he deserves. The next few days are a blur of gauze, dreams, and distant music. The pain fades slowly, like thunder moving off over hills. You're fed broth patted dry by soft hands and kept apart from the others. They want you healed, yes, but also reshaped, unmoored from your old self. Once. You can stand again. Ignatius begins your reintroduction. You are now Charis pure, he says. A cherished boy. Act like it. You're taught how to walk, not march, but glide. One foot in front of the other, toe first, like your weight is an illusion. You learn how to pour wine without spilling a drop, how to make conversation that flatters without inviting scandal. You memorize the life stories of every god, goddess, and senator's pet parrot. Oh, and the senator, Masala, he doesn't speak to you directly for another week. He just ... watches ... one afternoon. During a sun-drenched garden stroll, he finally addresses you. Do you like figs? You nod. He smiles. Good. I had them brought from Cyprus. Only the best. The next day, your breakfast tray includes figs. You chew slowly. You taste nothing. Your stomach still knots with every sunrise. There's a myth going around that Roman elites treated their concubines with affection, even devotion. Some probably did. But love in this world is currency, and yours can be revoked any time. One of your duties is to accompany Masala during his baths, a daily ritual. That's more about gossip and strategy than cleanliness. You fetch towels, oil, sometimes poetry scrolls. But mostly you listen. You begin to recognize names: Scaevola, Publius, Julia Domitilla, senators, courtesans, rivals. Masala tests your memory by asking questions later. What did Scaevola Say about the new tax on fishmongers. You hesitate, raises an eyebrow. Just kidding, he says. You're not here to think. Still, you start to remember things. You can't help it. Your brain becomes a vault, full of whispered plans and offhand boasts. And every day, the senator leans on you a little more, sometimes literally, sometimes metaphorically, a fringe tidbit you learn from another concubine. Romans believed amethyst prevented intoxication. Masala often drinks wine from an amethyst. Cupin insists on pressing it to your lips before his own. Superstition? Sure. But in Rome, superstition and survival go hand in hand. One night, you're summoned to the triclinium, the formal dining room, not to serve, but to attend. You're dressed in gauzy fabric that hides little, draped just so. You're made to sit beside Masala, who strokes your hair while debating military funding with 3 generals. They don't look at you yet. They do. That same "where will he fit in my estate" look again. It makes your skin crawl. When they leave, Masala pulls you aside. His voice is low, almost gentle. You're becoming exactly what I hoped. You wonder what that means, if you don't ask. Sometimes in the middle of the night, you sneak to your little window and press your forehead to the cool glass. You whisper your old name, just to hear it once more in this world. No one else will. Say it again. There's a servant girl named Livia who brings you extra honey cakes when no one's looking. One night, she whispers, "They sent my brother away because he saw something he shouldn't." Be careful what you notice. That's your first real warning. You don't forget it, because in Rome, beauty has weight. Yours now drags behind you like a golden chain. Everyone smiles. Everyone pretends. But under the lavender oil and polished marble, there's always the quiet scrape of ambition. You lie awake wondering who you'll be next week, or whether you'll still be. You're back in the atrium, again barefoot. Again holding a shallow dish of honeyed almonds that you're not allowed to eat. A visiting magistrate complains that they're too soft. You make a mental note. There's a whole category of things you notice now that you never cared about before. How many grapes to serve per plate? Which senator likes his wine warmed with saffron? Who prefers slaves to make eye contact and who doesn't? You're not just decoration anymore. Your trained Ignatius starts your new daily lessons just after sunrise. Before the city wakes, but after the birds begin their whispery chirping. The air smells like olive leaves and yesterday's incense. Your posture is checked first back. Straight, chin low, like you're always listening but never assuming. Then there's diction. You recite Latin poetry with calculated breath and barely concealed boredom. Today's topic is Lucan's Pharsalia. Yeah, sure. And you hate every melodramatic line of it. Make the words fall from your mouth like jewels, Ignatius says, adjusting your hands as you gesture. Not like wet laundry. You nod, but you practice. You become a sort of mirror reflecting charm, wit, and desire, but none of it is yours. Your schedule becomes as rigid as a Roman aqueduct. Poetry in the morning. Dining etiquette at noon, rest during the hottest hour, as if, then music. Massage techniques, and finally, something they call emotional responsiveness. That's just a fancy term for learning how to be whatever someone else wants at this point. If you've learned to anticipate emotions you don't feel. You smile when someone jokes, even if the joke's about feeding your ancestors to lions. You widen your eyes in interest when some dull patrician explains the difference between 2 types of marble. It's an exhausting performance. You're always acting, but unlike the actors in the theater, you don't get applause. Just silence, or worse, more duties. Here's a historical fact to chew on while you smile through another recitation. Elite Roman households had more slaves than citizens. Some villas had over 400 slaves. You were always being watched. Even the walls have ears. You learn not to whisper near the fountains. The water amplifies everything. You learn to wait 3 seconds after a question before answering. You learn that when the cook offers you leftovers, it's a test. If you say yes, you're greedy. If you say no, you're ungrateful. You say thank you and throw it away when she's not looking. You begin to understand that survival here means being precise. You're not trying to win favor. You're trying not to lose it. And then there's the book. One night, as you oil Masala's back by lamplight, he asks, "Can you read Greek?" You nod. Slowly, he smiles and hands you a scroll. It's a medical text by Cyrannus of Ephesus, filled with anatomical diagrams and philosophies on body temperament. You're not sure what it means yet. You're not even sure what you're meant to do with it. But the fact that he gave it to you, it means something. He sees you as a project, a pliable, pretty little student. And that means you're still safe. For now, historians still argue whether concubines in Rome were ever educated beyond what their masters required. But Cyrannus's writings mention household youths of exceptional memory, which, well, could be you. Ignatius is not impressed. A surgeon's manual, he says. I was hoping for Ovid's Amoras. At least that's honest. Still, you read it? Mostly at night, squinting by candlelight, tracing the diagram of a liver and wondering where your future is stored. In your lungs? In your hands? One of the villa's older servants, a Greek named Anthios, tells you a strange tidbit during laundry duty. They say if you press your ear to the marble at night, he whispers, you can hear the villa breathing. You try it once. He's right. The whole house hums, faintly voices, footsteps, the scurry of mice through walls. The villa is alive. It remembers. Your training starts to show. One morning, you're asked to serve breakfast to a guest of Mesalazan, Eastern diplomat. Wearing rings on every finger and an eye like he already owns the room, you pour his wine perfectly. He smiles. He taps the table once and says, you'd be worth twice as much in Antioch. Ah, you don't respond. That's the correct move. After he leaves, Masala chuckles and says, they always want what I have. You're not sure if he's referring to the diplomatic treaty, or you. Still, a small part of you feels pride. Not for being wanted, but for being unshakable. Every line of your training has settled into muscle memory. You're the kind of silent storm that Rome pretends doesn't exist. Then you make your first mistake. It's minor. You laugh just a little during a retelling of a chariot crash that killed 2 senators. You're tired. The wine's gone to your head. The joke wasn't even that good. The room goes quiet. Masala doesn't punish you. He simply ends the evening early. The next day you're reassigned to scrub floors. Not because they're dirty, because you are. Ignatius finds you by the courtyard mosaic, rubbing soap into non-existent stains. Remember, he says, you're not here to be you. You're here to be them. You nod. Then you start over. The hallway to the senator's private quarters smells like warmed cedar and crushed violets, an intentional blend chosen. You're told to ease digestion and encourage amiable moods. You're summoned here. Now, more frequently than before, not to serve wine or recite Lucan, to sit, to listen, to be. You kneel beside a couch with down-stuffed cushions, close enough to smell the sharp, clean linen of Masala's toga. He's older than he looks in. Torchlight lines etched deep around his mouth, where smiles rarely form. Tonight, his fingers trace the rim of his goblet slowly, deliberately. You're improving, he says, without turning. You know better than to respond immediately. 2 seconds pass. Thank you, Dominus, you say. Just above a whisper that earns a slight nod. He gestures for more wine, and you pour without spilling a drop. You're the senator's favorite now, and everyone in the villa knows it. With this role comes new duties, not just attending to his needs, but representing him in subtler ways. You're told to sit with visiting magistrates to escort his wife's cousin on a garden stroll. To report back casually, of course, who speaks too freely. You've become something more complex, part ornament, part spy. One morning, Masala calls you into the library, his private sanctuary. Walls of scrolls tower like waves ready to crash down. A silver brazier flickers quietly in the corner, releasing faint trails of cinnamon and pine. The senator waves a letter. From the east, he mutters. Apparently, someone there remembers your face. You freeze. Don't worry, he smirks. They offered too little. Takes a moment to understand. Someone tried to buy you back. A merchant, maybe. A family member. A ghost from the life you barely remember. You should feel something, relief maybe, or sorrow. But all you feel is cold. Not because of what almost happened, but because it didn't later that week. You meet Gaius. He's another delicatus, on loan from a neighboring estate. tall, with laughter that bends around corners. He's been in the game longer than you, and it shows. His eyes are always watching, measuring. He teaches you how to read between the lines of a senator's compliments. If they call you a treasure, he says, they're deciding whether to keep you or trade you. If they say radiant, it means you're still new. Once they stop saying anything at all, that's when you start praying to Mercury. You're like Gaius, which is exactly why you know to be careful around him. One evening, during a banquet, with soft flutes and too much wine, Messala places a hand on your shoulder and murmurs, "Stay close." The consul's had a long week, you obey, sitting quietly beside a man whose breath smells of vinegar and olives. He doesn't touch you, but he looks at you, the entire night. Every time you turn your head, his gaze is waiting. You learn later that Messala arranged it on purpose to make the consul envious, to show off your presence as currency, your silence, power, a mainstream fact. Here's one. Roman concubines were often used as status symbols, like imported glassware or exotic pets. You're not a person, you're proof of someone else's. Success. Back in your chamber, you find a gift waiting, a carved bone comb and a small flask of Egyptian perfume. From Messala, apparently. You're unsure if it's a reward or an apology. Maybe both. Maybe neither. The next morning, you're summoned to the peristyle garden, where Messala's wife, Livia Vittoria, takes her walks. She rarely acknowledges. Today she speaks. You hold yourself too proudly for someone so. Transitional, she says, not even glancing your way. You bow. It's not too low. Just enough to avoid rebuke. She plucks a sprig of rosemary, sniffs it, then tosses it aside. Tell me, do you remember your mother? It's not a question. It's a trap. No, Domina, you answer. Good. She likely had no manners. And just like that, you learn your presence isn't just useful, it's also resented that night. Messala reads you a passage from Virgil. He mispronounces 3 words. You correct one, just one. Softly, he slaps you. It's the first time he doesn't explain. He doesn't need to. You understand. You were too clever, too confident, too real. The next day, you keep your mouth shut. You nod when appropriate. You lower your eyes at the right times. You're perfect again. But the bruise stays, light and round, like a fingerprint. Etched into your cheekbone, you hear Gaius laugh later that week and realize he's still here, still playing his role. But his eyes, they've dulled. The mirror cracked somewhere along the way, and he just kept smiling. Messala used to love poetry, he tells you once. Now he just quotes whatever sounds expensive. You know what that means? Gaius has lost favor. 2 days later, he's gone, no warning, no farewell. Just an empty seat at the bath and a missing name from the laundry list. Some say he was sold. Others whisper he was taken to a villa outside Tiber for correction. You don't ask. You just keep your posture straight, your chin low. But that night you press your hand to the wall and feel the breath of the villa again. Still alive, still watching, and you, still here. You're lying on a cushion that smells faintly of old sandalwood. In spilled wine, your hands folded neatly over your lap like you've been taught. The room buzzes with the gentle clink of goblets and the low hum of aristocratic scheming disguised as conversation. There's a scroll half unfurled on Messala's knee, but he's not reading. He's watching the door, and then the guest arrives. His name is Vibius Rufus, a man with too many titles and not enough morals. He's wearing a deep green tunic that doesn't quite hide the gold clasps at his shoulders. He smells like resin and arrogance. Messala stands, arms wide in welcome. Rufus, you old monster. They laugh, they embrace, they exaggerate their warmth. You remain kneeling. You're invisible until you're not. This is the boy I mentioned, Messala says, motioning to you without even glancing. Sharp ears, sharper instincts. Rufus steps closer. His eyes are pale and bloodshot. Pretty, he says, in a tone that makes your stomach clench. Does he bite? Only when asked. Everyone laughs. You don't laugh. This is your new role tonight. You're bait. A silver tray appears in your hands, as if by sorcery. And you begin the round. Wine for the guest, water just enough to dull judgment but not insult. You pour slowly, carefully, while Rufus watches your hands, then your face, then lower. Messel begins talking politics. Land disputes in Gaul, grain imports, votes bought, votes sold. You're not meant to listen, but of course you do. Every detail might matter later, but your true job tonight isn't listening. It's lingering. You brush against Rufus's sleeve as you pass, not on accident. You refill his goblet before he finishes speaking. You smile when he boasts about his last triumph in the Senate. You don't roll your eyes, though you want to. And then, when the moment is just right, Masala makes the move. My dear Rufus, he purrs. How's your appetite for delicate arrangements? There it is. The line, you've been trained. For this, not to offer, not to refuse. It's just to make it seem like Rufus thought of it first. You have something specific in mind? Rufus asks, voice thick with suggestion. Masala chuckles. I'm sure the boy will be ... informative. And so you are. Later that evening, you sit beside Rufus while he speaks in broken Greek about trade routes in the East. He's half drunk, and your hand rests lightly on his arm. You're nodding at all the right times. Even though your mind has wandered somewhere safer, maybe back to the smell of rosemary and the peristyle, or the sound of rain that sometimes falls in Rome like a soft apology, when he leaves, Masala is pleased. You've done well, he says. He won't vote against me now, not after tonight. You've become part of a currency older than coins, something more powerful, more dangerous. This wasn't unusual in elite Roman households. Historian Suetonius described Emperor Tiberius's infamous minnows that Capri young boys used for pleasure and leverage. Well, not every senator went to such grotesque extremes. Many still played the same game in subtler ways. You are now that game. The next day, Masala gives you a bracelet. Simple bronze, but the gesture isn't lost on you. It's not affection. It's a signal. You're valuable. You're effective. You're mine. Ignatius sees it and doesn't say a word, just nods once. That week, you're summoned to the garden again. It's not by Livia, but by her niece, a sharp-eyed girl named Valeria, who can quote 3 Greek tragedians, but still thinks figs grow underground. She brings you a message. My aunt says to tell you this. Watch the door when it's closed, but watch it harder when it's open. You nod. You don't ask questions. Because later that night, while rubbing oil into Masala's shoulders, he says something that chills you, Rufus. Might send you a gift. Accept it. You nod. And if he asks what I said about the grain levy, you'll tell him exactly what he wants to hear. You hesitate. You want me to lie? He smiles genuinely this time. Want you to serve? You're learning that pleasure and politics are never separate in this house. That your words can twist a vote just as much as a dagger in an alley, only quieter, more effective. Historians still argue whether the concubines of the elite actually influenced state affairs or merely overheard them. But consider this. Rome was run in whispered deals, not Senate scrolls. If you control the whisper, you control the world. One morning, Rufus's servant arrives with a gift, a polished wooden box and a folded note. Inside is a small vial of imported myrrh and a delicate glass figurine shaped like a dolphin. The note reads, Your grace is remembered. Expect my favor. You're not sure whether to feel flattered or hunted. Masala reads the note and chuckles. Good, the grain bill will pass. You ask cautiously, and if it doesn't? He shrugs. Then you'll smile prettier next time. You start sleeping more lightly now. Every creak in the hallway sounds like a turning key. Every gift carries weight. Even the dolphin figurine, its eyes seem to knowing. A quirky tidbit. From Anthios, the old Greek servant. In my village, dolphins were good omens. But only when swimming away from you. You keep the figurine. But you turn it to face the wall. And when you sleep, it watches nothing. There's a peach slice balanced on the edge of your plate and touched. You're not hungry, but you've learned that not eating at a banquet is as dangerous as eating too much. It's the 6th night in a row you've attended one of these evening feasts, lounging at your master's side like a treasured artifact. smiling and murmuring pleasantries while your mind drifts toward quieter rooms. Tonight's banquet takes place at the villa of Senator Regulus, one of Masala's rivals. The invitation was a power move, a subtle taunt, and Masala accepted it as if doing so proved nothing mattered. You arrived dressed in a new tunic, dyed with saffron and edged in indigo thread. Exotic. Pricey. You walk one step behind Masala, trained to pause when he pauses, to laugh a half-second after he does, to vanish into the folds of conversation when required. You're seated on a cushion just behind him, with an arm's reach but slightly below eye level. Perfect for pouring wine, fetching fruit, or offering a quiet word to support a fragile ego. The dining room glows gold under dozens of small lamps suspended from chains, what the Romans call lucernae volantes, flying lights. Shadows. They swirl lazily over the frescoes, painted gods in mid-debauchery, dancing eternally. The air is thick with perfume and ambition. You hear the same phrases over and over. ... Reliable grain flow from Alexandria. ... His wife's cousin was overheard with the praetor's nephew. ... And ... The new tax on street performers is causing unrest. Politics wrapped in gossip. You tune it out until you can't, because Senator Regulus starts talking. About you, Masala, he drawls, wine sloshing near his lip. This new delicatus of yours, he's quieter than your last one. Masala gives a relaxed smile, the kind he uses when he's plotting a social evisceration. He listens. Regulus. A rare trait these days. You keep your eyes on the peach slice. Regulus leans forward. Does he sing? Masala waves his hand. He sings, recites, fetches, flatters everything but fly. They laugh. You feel heat rise in your cheeks. You hide it with a bow. Then, suddenly, Regulus turns to you. Recite something, boy. Your throat goes dry. Masala doesn't stop him. You choose something safe. A few lines from Catullus. Light, elegant, sensual, but not too much. You keep. Your voice steady, your hands folded. Regulus raises an eyebrow when you finish. Better than the eunuch from Iridium. That one recited like a goose being throttled. More laughter. You've passed the test. For now, the rest of the evening blurs into wine-soaked theater. A pair of musicians perform near the atrium, and two hired dancers, one veiled. One painted blues way through columns like spirits from a fever dream. You sit and sip the wine they hand you, not enough to blur your thoughts, but enough to pretend you belong. Later, you catch a moment alone in the garden, by a shallow pool filled with white lilies and orange fish. You crouch by the edge and whisper your own name again. It's just to remember what it sounds like. Footsteps behind you, Masala. You did well tonight, he says. Regulus is drunk enough to forget his vote, drunk enough to think we're friends. Nod. It's not a compliment. It's a report. Do you know why I bring you to these things, he asks. You hesitate, to show status. He chuckles, partly but mostly. Because rooms get looser when you're in them? People say things they shouldn't. People watch you. Not me. You swallow hard. You're more useful than you realize, he says. And I'm not the only one who's noticed. The next morning, you're not summoned to serve breakfast or prepare for more tutoring. Instead, you're led to a narrow room with no windows, just a pair of cushions and a low table with inkwells and scrolls. A scribe greets you. His hands are stained with ink, and his smile is too sharp. You're being trained for something new. He says, don't worry, it's not worse, just ... more delicate. He teaches you how to recognize seals and signatures, how to copy a letter without changing its meaning or changing it just enough. Forgery. In other words, not all concubines got this kind of trust. But you're no longer just flesh for show. You're a tool in a longer game. One of the scrolls you're shown bears the seal of a legate in Germania. Another, a merchant's report from Antioch. You're told to practice both. Memorize the handwriting, the scribe says. Match the slant, the pressure, even the bad Latin. Authenticity is in the flaws. Here's a quirky tidbit. Romans believed that a man's handwriting revealed his soul. That's why most nobles never wrote anything themselves. Too risky. Too honest back at the villa, your new role remains a secret to most. But people notice that Masala watches you more closely now, that he asks you strange questions during dinner, that you're no longer just arm candy, you're a quiet storm with ink-stained fingers. One evening, Antheo slips you a bit of advice while adjusting your sash. "Never write in the same hand twice," he mutters. Even the stupidest senator knows when he's being mimicked. You nod. You're learning from everyone. Every whisper, every raised eyebrow, every broken pattern. Historians still debate how often slaves were involved in Roman espionage. Some claim they were passive tools. Others argue they were the backbone of noble intrigue. You know, because your next forged scroll goes not to Regulus but to Rufus, and it's a lie. A beautiful, dangerous lie. It's strange how the richest homes in Rome always smell faintly of something burning. It's not fire, more like oil lamps left too long unattended, or incense meant to cover the stink of sweat and wine and ambition. You walk through Masala's villa every day now with a clearer sense of your purpose, and it's no longer just serving or smiling. It's surviving. It's calculating. You're in the middle of something larger than yourself. Wheels within wheels, and you're starting to see the teeth of the machine. You've just handed the forged scroll to a courier with trembling fingers. It's sealed. Perfectly addressed to Senator Vibius Rufus. And it says exactly what Masala wants it to say. That Regulus is planning to vote against a proposed land reallocation, and that Rufus had better intervene. It's a trap, beautifully constructed. One. And you're the bait. But while the noble games play out in heated Senate debates and private dinners, life below the marble floors thrums with a very different kind of power. Today, you're sent to the storage cellars beneath the villa, tasked with retrieving a jar of honey wine that Masala insists is too delicate for clumsy hands. You descend a narrow stone staircase into the cool, quiet dark end. You realize something immediately. Down here, no one's pretending. There are no silken tunics or practiced smiles. Just sweat, rope burns, broken nails, and eyes that have seen everything. A boy about your age is stirring a vat of garam-fermented fish sauce that could make a god gag. His hands are stained gray from the salt. "You're the senator's shadow," he says without looking up. "Figured you were taller." You blink. "I'm just fetching wine." He chuckles. "Sure. His name's Remus, and he's been working in the villa's cellars since before you arrived. He knows where every jug, scroll, and secret is kept. And unlike upstairs, he doesn't speak in code. You think you're special?" he says, wiping fish oil on his tunic. "You're just better upholstered." It stings. Because it's not wrong. You learn more from Remus in 30 minutes than from a week of dinner parties. He explains the hidden routes under the villa, where the coal dust settles, and which steward pockets coin from underreported grain shipments. He hides them in the false bottom amphory, he whispers. Smart, but greedy. Here's a mainstream fact. Most Romans never spoke aloud. Villas like Masala's ran on slavery. The back end of the estate, the kitchens, cellars, laundries, and stables house dozens of invisible workers. Others, like you, were brought in from the fringes of empire. Don't ever forget, Remus says. You may live on silk sheets, but someone's breaking their back to clean them. You don't. The next few days shift your awareness. You start paying attention to more than just facial expressions and veiled threats. You watch how long the bakers sleep, how often the cistern is checked, how many locks are on the storerooms. You learn the true economy of the villi, the things even Masala doesn't understand. Like how Livia Vituria's personal maid has her own spy network, or how the driver of the senator's chariot once blackmailed a nobleman for kissing the wrong boy at the theater. Everyone's got dirt. The lower you go, the thicker it gets. And with that dirt comes leverage. You trade favors quietly. An extra plum for a tip about a visiting legate's mistress. A spilled amphora covered for an exchange for news about which bathhouse the magistrates use when they think no one's watching. You're becoming useful. But not just to Masala. Remus warns you one night. wiping your hands with a linen cloth. Some of the kitchen girls think you're a spy. Others think you're a ghost. You smile. Maybe both. Quirky fact. Some Roman households believed certain slaves, especially the beautiful silent ones, could see omens. They were called umbri shadows. Invisible, but always watching. You're beginning to fit the title. One evening, a commotion erupts near the stables. A mule kicks over a wine crate, and in the chaos a parchment falls loose, one of your forgeries. Not the forged scroll, thankfully. But another, a draft Masala told you to copy and destroy. You snatch it before anyone sees. But Remus saw? He says nothing. The thread is clear, though. One slip, and you go from delicatus to dead weight. That night, Masala calls for you. He's unusually tense. No poetry, no wine, just a cold stare. You heard what happened at the Senate? He asks. You shake your head, no, Dominus. He throws a goblet across the room. It shatters against the marble wall, spraying wine like blood. Rufus bit too early, he growls. He brought it up before Regulus said a word. Now Regulus suspects me. You freeze? Was the seal perfect? He demands. You nod. Yes, the language. Did you copy it exactly? Yes, Dominus. He stares hard. Then finally he exhales. Someone tipped Regulus off. Not you. I know that. But someone. You're dismissed, but not forgotten. Later, in the quiet of your chamber, you feel the trap tighten. Not the one in the senators. You've gone from decoration to instrument to liability. You're no longer just being used. You're being weighed. Historians still argue whether slaves in Roman households ever wielded real political power. But those arguments tend to ignore one key point. They were the ones who delivered letters, poured wine, dressed wounds, made the beds, and overheard everything. Back in the cellars, Remus gives you a small scrap of folded cloth. Inside it, a tiny bronze key. What's this? You whisper. The storeroom, he says. The one with the false bottom amphory. Why give it to me? He shrugs. Maybe one day you'll need proof. Or a way out. You stare at it, cold and weightless in your palm. Maybe both. The sun in Alexandria is a different kind of cruel. It doesn't just burn, it reveals. Stones under your sandals radiate heat like coals, and the salt-laced breeze from the harbor does nothing to cool it. You walk along the colonnaded street wearing a hooded linen wrap, head down steps. Calculated. You've been here for 3 months now, hiding behind a borrowed name and a stolen past, feeding yourself on careful lies and dates bought too cheap. You were supposed to vanish. You almost did. But something keeps pulling you back. Your arrival. In Alexandria had been desperate. A forged document, a forged accent, forged friends made quickly in taverns where no one asked too many questions. You changed your posture, your manner of speaking, even the way you breathed. You smiled more, spoke less. Learned to blend with philosophers, merchants, dancers, and sailors. It almost worked until it didn't, because one morning outside a temple of Serapis, you saw a familiar face. Not Masella, not Rufus, but Gud. Alive, he didn't see you. Or maybe he pretended not to. He was thinner, a little grayer, his tunic coarser than before. But it was him. And for the first time since your escape, you felt the past draw breath and open its eyes. You follow him, not immediately, not obviously. Over days, through crowded streets, shadowed arcades, and under flickering lanterns at night. He's working for a Roman grain merchant now, half bodyguard, half courier. He still moves like someone expecting chains. Finally, you corner him in the courtyard of a bathhouse. He doesn't flinch. I knew you'd follow, he says. You sit. Neither of you speaks for a while then, quietly. Why didn't you say anything? He shrugs. Because I'm done being part of other people's stories. And yet here you both are, still tangled in the unwritten ones. He gives you news. Masala's fall from favor in affair, a scandal, a trail of forgeries too clever for his own good. There are whispers that he was poisoned by his own wife. Others say he was exiled to a minor province in Lusitania, where no one knows his name. Historians still argue which version is true. None of them mention you. Gaius leans forward. What? Now? You reach into your satchel and produce the object you've carried all this time tucked in a fold of linen. Hidden even from yourself, it's the dolphin figurine. From Rufus, polished smooth by touch, worthless, precious. You place it between you both. I think it's time to stop running, you say, and start remembering. That night, you return to the shoreline, where fishermen pull their nets and boys leap into waves like reckless gods. You sit in the sand, watching the light fade across the harbor, and you write, not for anyone else, just to remember. You tell your story who you were, what they called you, what they did. You write every detail, every name, every whispered word. Not for revenge, not even for justice, but because you existed, and you want that truth to outlive you. 1 year later, a foreign scholar purchases a crate of scrolls from a dying librarian in Alexandria. Among them is your account coded, cryptic, almost poetic. It vanishes into a private collection for centuries, but it's found again in a museum. Scratched into an amulet's case, it's just a name, barely legible yours. Not the one Masala gave you. Not the one the slavers called you yours, and someone reads it and wonders. Now, as we drift gently toward the end of this journey, let's slow everything down. If you've walked through dimly lit villas and across sunburned stones, worn the silks of a favored toy and the dust of a fugitive's cloak, you've listened closely, whispered softer, and survived not just the violence of Rome, but the silence it demands of people like you. The city never remembered you on its terms, but you remembered yourself. You weren't just someone else's luxury, not just an asset on parchment or a weapon in someone's whispered plan. You were a voice, quiet but unbroken, echoing beneath the marble, between the columns, under the skin of the empire, and maybe that voice hidden in a poem, tucked into a figurine, carved into the back of a forgotten amulet. Maybe it still speaks, even now. So take a deep breath. Let the air settle around your shoulders like the soft linen of your old sleeping tunic. Let your thoughts untangle from empire and exile and slip into the comfort of a quiet room with no watchers, no masters, just you, safe, still, and maybe, finally, free. Good night, friend. Sweet dreams.